Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on architecting a ransomware-proof backup and recovery plan for 2026. Today's presenters, I'm Gurdip Sohal. I'm the Sales Director for the Data Management business here at Covenco, and I'm going to be hosting the event. I'm joined by David Johnson from Object First. He looks after the EMEA region as an account manager. We've got Luca De Loca, who I'm really pleased to have on board with us, EMEA Cloud Principal Architect for Veeam. And we've got Ben, our Head of Managed Services as well. So quick look at the agenda. We all know there's a massive challenge out there in terms of ransomware. We're all looking for ways to protect ourselves against that. And therefore today we'll be talking about the current landscape and what that consists of. Some facts and figures from a Coveware by Veeam report. So Coveware is an organisation, an incident response organisation that Veeam acquired a few years ago. We'll also look forward to what we can expect in 26 as a trending range of ransomware issues. We'll then look at how we can defend against that. So this presentation by Luca at Veeam talking about intelligence data protection by Veeam. We've got then the role of immutability, and David will be talking about that from Object First. And then Ben and myself will work on talking to you about how to build a backup and recovery plan that is testable, the considerations that are required around that. Finally, we'll look at the questions, if there are any, and then some key takeaways. So, if we look at the current threat landscape, I've listed 6 items here that are based off of a report generated by Coveware. And the first item on this list is social engineering and how it's driving the biggest threats in the industry at the moment, largely led by 3 threat actor groups, Scatter Spider being one, Silent Ransom and Shiny Hunters. They dominated the quarter, and each of them leveraging highly targeted social engineering breaches across the sector. Their emphasis has shifted from mass opportunistic attacks to highly targeted, sophisticated social engineering attacks. Second area was that ransom payments have soared to new heights. In fact, if we looked at the same report in Q1, they've actually increased by 104% over or in Q2, which is a huge jump, clearly. The average ransomware payment now is something in the region of about $1.13 million. There's also been a change and a shift in how threat actors or the motivations of the threat actors from causing mass disruption through to actually focusing more around the theft of your data as opposed to disabling your organization from operationally trading. We've seen that professional services, healthcare and consumer services are the highest hit sectors, and there's a nice slide which I'll talk about shortly, showing the wider scope of the sectors that are affected by this. We've seen that the attack techniques have evolved. Human factor remains a key vulnerability, and again, with a really nice slide that can show where these people have focus. And then we look at some of the new threat actors and how they're reshaping the ransomware rankings. So, if we start with that final point, the most common ransomware variants reported in Q2 were Akira at 19%, Quillin 13%, Lone Wolf at 9%, and then Silent Ransom, Shiny Hunters, and Dragon Force making up the remaining. So these new entrants are the ones that are causing a lot of disruption in the marketplace. If we look at the most common ransomware initial attack vectors, then we can see here that remote access compromise is ranked the highest. It's grown tremendously over the last quarter. Phishing has also been the same, and that's reflective of the ransomware operators in the marketplace. And then software vulnerabilities, again, has been on the increase, and we've seen various vendors that have been targeted. One in particular that I know about from our own customer base is that SonicWall had a breach, a leak of their configurations, and I know of at least one customer where they were compromised via a VPN attack. So absolutely real. I really like this slide because I think it sort of hammers home what sectors are being affected. And as I said earlier, professional services, healthcare and consumer services are the hardest hit. Professional services in at about maybe 20%, healthcare 13.7%, and consumer services 13.7%. So nearly half of the percentage-wise of the people affected are within those sectors. Sorry. The size of the organisation impacted by ransomware. I again find this very interesting because if you take a look at the slide here, you see that any company that ranges from 11 users to 1,000 users in size makes up about 70% of the organisations that have been affected. And I know that looking at the list of attendees today, this is going to resonate because a lot of those organisations will fall within that bracket. So the threat is real. What can we look forward to, unfortunately, in 2026 from a threat landscape perspective? Well, AI-powered attacks are, again, the biggest threat, really. Threat actors are embracing AI at speed. The scope and effectiveness of their operations is enhancing. Deepfake audio, video, for example, leading to very sophisticated social engineering attacks. If you look at the Marks and Spencer's breach, for example, it was based on social engineering, somebody contacting a help desk as a user, convincing the help desk that they are a bona fide user, and then gaining access into the environment. Ransomware and extortion, data theft. I talked about that. That's going to increase because that's where the focus is at the moment. Multifaceted extortion remains a major financial threat, and attacks targeting critical infrastructure and supply chains is also really, really high on the list. You have the critical or vulnerabilities within critical infrastructure, again relating to the slide previously. As soon as a CVE is announced, it's out there. People are scouting for entry in and trying to break into environments, and these guys are quick. They have, they're organised crime gangs, if you want to call it that. So they have their finger on the pulse. So it's very, very important that we protect ourselves against that. We have nation state and cyber espionage. You've all seen the news over the last couple of days. There's talks of certain nations deploying espionage techniques. We have Russian ships that are, in the waters of the British Isles, scouting for various information on where our data cables are running. We have drone warfare. So the nation state side of things is forever on the increase, and that just represents the state of the world, I guess, as it is today. And then finally, quantum computing. Now, this is again very interesting threat. We understand that by 2029, quantum computers will be so powerful that they'll be able to break what we today rely upon as encryption. So I know that through various presentations that I've attended, there's a number of key vendors in security are looking at this area to try and come up with solutions to help prevent that scenario from happening. But what these threat actors are doing at the moment is harvesting credentials now so that they can use those going forward when they have the ability to crack these through the use of quantum computing. If we look at the impact on your business, again, I've broken this down into 4 areas: financial losses, Theft of funds and data is very high on the list. Response and recovery expenses. So if you are breached, the cost of recovery can be very expensive. Ransomware payments themselves, if organizations opt to pay a ransom, it's expensive. Lost revenue and productivity, again, the disruption that a ransomware attack can cause does lead to loss of revenue because you can't produce anything. And then you've got the ongoing costs, or the increase of ongoing costs. So to better protect yourselves, the introduction of various technologies, insurance premiums going up. So these are the financial losses that we see. From an operational point of view, system downtime, clearly a big factor. If you look at the Jaguar Land Rover exploit, they were pretty much out for 6 weeks at least on production. That led to loss of productivity. It caused a whole manner of issues within their supply chain, with some organizations, literally being on the verge of going out of business. So it's affecting their business continuity, and causing them problems within their own business continuity throughout the supply chain. You've got the legal and regulatory consequences. Will you have to stump up a fine or penalties? Will you be faced with lawsuits? Because you haven't been able to deliver on a contract and therefore you're in breach. And then finally, you have the reputational damages, which again feeds into the financial loss side. So, loss of customers, their trust, the loyalty, negative publicity. Again, if you get breached, there's this negativity attached to it, even though we have the biggest organizations in the country under attack and in the news. Difficulty in acquiring new business becomes even more challenging, and then obviously the decrease in confidence of the investors can also be highly effective for any organization.
So another thing, another thing on that is the IT teams within your organizations, like the stress that they go under, the stress that impacts them, people leaving as a result, people feeling like they got blamed, people feeling the stress beforehand of, I think my system's inadequate, am I the person everyone's going to point the finger at, that type of thing, the human factor internally as well. Absolutely.
I work with my customers for a very long time. A lot of them we build really strong relationships with, and when I've seen some of these people, the pressure that they're under when they've suffered an incident, it really is quite heartbreaking, even from my perspective. It does cause a lot of strain and stress. So absolutely agree with that. So the threat's real. Give me some stats there that you can take away and maybe utilize if you have to present anything further up within your businesses. And there's more to come, and it's getting more sophisticated. So that's my bit done on the threat landscape. So I'm going to move on now to Luca, who's going to be talking about intelligent data protection by Veeam, and what Veeam are doing to help fight in this fight against the ransomware issues. Thank you,
Gordon. Thank you. No, and it's a perfect introduction, because the number you just mentioned, and you mentioned the fact that we have numbers coming from our internal research, is not just to make awareness into people, but also to take decision, for example, in the development of our technology. Like, okay, what are the biggest threats that are coming into any one data center? So that gives priorities on what we want to achieve every time we release a new version of the software, okay? Because we analyze what's happening. So it's data-driven decision, which is more than obviously a feeling, about what's better to be done. And this is the perfect day, for example, by the way, to talk about what we've done lately, because we just released yesterday the latest version of our software, version 13. And we are trying with that release to address even more problems that we're facing. Because as you mentioned, cyber attacks are common. They happen daily, hourly, every minute we see this one. Attempts are becoming more frequent, and they're not just targeting production data anymore. They're also targeting backup, because backups are your only way to escape from a ransom request. Because if you have a backup, you can restore your data and avoid to pay a ransom. So they are actively targeting the backups. And you mentioned before AI. In general, they're using AI even to improve the sophistication of the attacks they're doing. So they try to find new ways to come into every network. As you mentioned, also for the human attack, so deep faking created by AI, it would be impossible without AI. Thankfully, we can also use AI on the defensive side. And that's what we have, for example, in our software in the latest couple of versions. Okay, we can analyze the data, we can figure out the so-called IOC, so indication of compromise, which is not just the trace of, let's say, a vulnerability happening, but some behavior in your environment that may be the indication of an incoming attack. Okay, and the problem is also the dwell time, because we got a delta of time between the compromise and the attack. Maybe the attacker is in your network for the last couple of months, you don't know. They've been silent because they want to, first of all, get information and understand how do you do work before hitting you. Because so when they hit you, the chance of having a success is very high. All of this shows up in the number, because we have seen 75% of the organization that we interview in our yearly report have reported at least one ransomware attack, which means more than one. Obviously, when you look at those numbers, people usually are shy to say the right number. So if 75% say at least one, it means that many of them got multiple. 96% of the attacks are targeting the backup, so we need to consider the backup as a production environment. It's just doing it something different, but it is another production environment. And you mentioned in your section the financial impact. The problem here is not just the downtime, is not the loss of data, is the loss of money at the end, because the main target, if you ignore for a moment, as you say, the nationwide attack, which are looking for some other goal, the goal for every, let's call private attacker, is just money. That's what they're looking for. So if you have money, you are a target. If you can pay a ransom, you are a target. It doesn't matter the business you are in, the size you are in, you have money, so you can pay the ransom potentially. So the solution, first of all, is a proactive threat assessment, as we call it. You mentioned Coware. This is a technology we have from a company we acquired and integrated in our solution. What we can do is not just doing the backup and come in after an attack to restore everything. That we keep doing that, obviously, but also have a proactive approach to what's happening around us in the production environment, in the backup environment, and scan and control the status of the environment to find, as I said, IOCs, ransomware incidents, before they potentially impact the organization. This can happen in multiple stages because we can do this before a backup, during a backup, or during the recovery. Before also means we integrate with other components. We are not a black box. We're not a silo. We are one of the components of an environment. So, for example, we have this Veeam incident API where we can receive trigger from other component, like say an IDS in the edge of the company intercept an attack coming in, and they can send immediately a message to us to say, hey, take a one-off backup of all our databases before something happens, because we have seen something coming in. That's just an example. Obviously, as you mentioned, the Raycon scanner before, or all the analytics technology we have for analyzing the behavior of the environment. Then we got our, let's say, our core, so the backup solution. So we do the backup, but we also do something together with the backup, which is analyzing the content of the backup to be sure that what's inside the backup is clean and ready to be used when there is a recovery need. Because there is nothing more, probably the second thing worse than losing a backup, it's having a backup and finding out that it's infected, so it's almost useless. Okay. This can also be done during the recovery because maybe we may need to use an old backup to restore our production. And at the time of the backup, we had a given level of knowledge about what was the state-of-the-art attacks. You mentioned the different vector in Q1 compared to Q2. This also means that something that is inside a backup in Q1 may not be noted by the signature we had at that time, but now we know them. So what we do is we also check the content during the restore. So we want to be 100% sure that we are restoring something that is clean and not infected again. This has all been packaged into our new Veeam software appliance, which is a pre-built, pre-hardened Linux machine. This is our big news for version 13. But again, this is related to the fact that you mentioned about the most common vector for an attack. And we looked specifically into the hardening part to lower the vulnerability of a given machine. So lowering the vulnerability, reducing this attack surface. And this has been done because the machine now is pre-hardened, pre-configured, so we can totally avoid misconfiguration, because David mentioned before, the IT teams are under pressure. So it may be common, not by mistake, just by mistake, not malevolence here, but somebody's doing the wrong configuration, and the wrong configuration can be exploited. So what we're trying to do is something that is configured by default in a secure way by applying a long list of hardening technologies inside the machine. So you only need to deploy it. It's also easy for management, and we try to avoid to being attacked by compromise of credential, because we can use single sign-on technology like SAML, multi-factor authentication. And one of the other line you have in your graph was which was our research. It was the internal type of attack, and this has been addressed in our technology by using way more granular role-based access control. Nobody needs to be an admin daily to run our solution. You can receive very specific and limited account to do the least amount of privileges to use our technology.
So that, Luca, really is a massive step forward, isn't it, from Veeam?
Yes.
Because you are completely locking down the VBR server. You can't misconfigure it. It's deployable as an ISO, right?
Correct. The big change is that obviously we are switching from Windows to Linux. The Windows version still stays there. So people who have Windows and want to keep updating the Windows version can totally do it. But now you have this Linux version. We chose Linux for also reducing the economic impact, also because somebody has to pay the licenses for the Windows machine. But also Linux is more useful for doing automation and hardening against the Linux box. That's why we want to move to Linux. The other advantage, for example, is high availability. This is specific to our Linux version. Now you can deploy 2 VBR machines. They connect to each other in a 2-node cluster. So whenever there is an issue on the primary node, you can easily switch without losing any configuration and any operation to the secondary node. Again, security can be, integrity can be confidentiality, but it's also availability. So making even the control plane as available as possible to keep running the business. Yes.
And I guess this is the first time we've seen high availability from a backup server brain perspective, right?
Yes. I mean, the idea is we try to separate completely the control plane and the data plane. Obviously, if I have to design which one I want to lose, I can easily lose the control plane as long as the data are intact and they can be used for restore. But I leave this section to David, which is, as this one as their own core aspect of the business. But even the control plane means operations, because you mentioned the Land Rover issue before. Yes, the data are important, but also the control plane is important, because if my backup software is down, I cannot start a new backup and I cannot start a new restore. So I need the control plane also to be up and running. You've seen what happened 2 days ago with Cloudflare. They got 3-hour outage in 6 years, which is an insane uptime, and still all the internet went crazy because people are relying on always-on business, and that's what we want to have. Okay, and as I said, role-based access control. This is just an example of what you can do. So you can have specific role, you can create scoping, you can give different permissions to people just to make the attack, even from internal, more difficult, or just avoiding people doing operation by mistake. Then this is just a side topic, maybe to the general discussion we had so far. Another aspect of availability is that you want to have workload moving around as fast as possible with the minimum downtime. So RPO close to 0. We already had this technology supporting VMware/Broadcom hypervisor as source as a target. Now we are expanding this technology by allowing different sources to leverage this technology. That's what we call universal CDP. And it means that you can deploy this agent into any Windows guest machine Doesn't matter if it's a virtual machine on an unsupported hypervisor, is a physical server, is a machine in an hyperscaler environment. You can deploy the agent and replicate stream-based all the data inside a VMware vSphere or vCloud Director hypervisor. So think about onboarding, think about data mobility, like moving from one hyperscaler to the other, or to a private provider environment like Covenco, DR for physical machines, laptops. You can think about every possible idea about this.
But the critical thing about this one, Luca, is that it's real time as well.
Yes, I mean, obviously it depends on the latency and the bandwidth, but on ideal condition, it goes down to 0 seconds. So it's real time whenever possible.
Yeah.
And I see a question coming in that it was about, yes, we moved everything to Linux, and people obviously say, what if I'm not a Linux guy? You don't need to know anything, because you can access the command line for doing some very specific activity, but on the regular operation, even the most advanced one, we got the UI. So the UI is still the same. Even more, we double down the UI, because you still have the console that you can install on any remote Windows laptop or desk computer for an admin, or we now have a new web UI, which is native into the system. We are moving slowly all the feature from the console to the web UI. So it's not 100% on pair so far, but imagine this, the daily operation, for example, for VMware and agents are already into the web UI. So this also removed the need for installing the Windows console, for example. You just connect to the web UI. Even the host management. So the second interface where you manage not just Veeam, but the underlying Linux is web-based. So you just go in, you log in. We have multi-factor authentication, and you need 4 eyes authentication. So a security officer needs to approve the admin login whenever you want to access the host management. And you can reconfigure everything, like network, time zones, updates. All the updates are done in the machine automatically, or you can manage them through the interface.
And actually, Luca, just on MFA and 4 eyes, they are mandatory now, right?
Yes.
It's not a choice of should we add it? Can we add it?
No, there is a very complex procedure to disable it if you really want to, but by default. But again, you need to have the approval of a security officer to disable some MFA configuration. So no single admin can disable MFA by himself. So let's say in this way, every dangerous operation you can do with the system at least requires 2 different people to make it done.
Sure. I know we said we'd address questions at the end, but there's one that's come up about how can we connect a physical tape drive to it?
This is a nice point. We said in the release yesterday that every role in Veeam now is possible on Linux. So you can have proxies, you can have repository, you can have the control machine, you can have the cloud gateway for Cloud Connect. There is one role that still stays on Windows, which is the tape server. And that's because all the majority of the tape drivers exist for Windows system and not for Linux systems. So we want to, instead of being, like a Taliban of Linux, we say, let's make it practical for people. And whenever it makes sense to stay on Windows, we stay on Windows. So we solve it by not touching it in this case.
Yeah. And Steve, I will come back to you on a one-on-one because we have a solution for that. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And actually, you're going to talk about the patching. That's great. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So the other idea is you saw in the session from Gurdip, one of the other problems is software vulnerabilities, just maybe because there exist bugs in the system, but also because some bugs have been fixed months ago and nobody took care of installing the patches. If you look at the statistics of every security vendor, they mentioned that the vast majority of the attacks hitting a vulnerability, there was a patch available before the attack happened or before the virus or the ransom happened. So there is a clear lack of the timeliness of applying patches. It may be, like David mentioned, because the IT people is under stress or because people don't have a clear process. We decided to go all in on this. So the system, the Linux version is going to auto-update itself, both for the underlying Linux system and the Veeam software on top of it. So we are, say, one resource for all the patches of this software appliance. You can choose to delay the patch and install it manually if you want to have more control. But in any case, any uninstalled patch is going to be applied after 90 days, which is even too much, probably. But at least we know that the system is going to be no more outdated than 3 months. I'm expecting many IT guys to just enable the auto patching and let it go. So yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we've got our first poll here. At which layers of your IT estate? Oh, that was quick. Which layers of your IT estate is some form of real-time malware or detection currently implemented? Okay, looks like we've had most of the respondents. So yeah, 58% showing us both A, B, and C, which is really encouraging. 33% at server and virtualization layer, and 8% at only backup infrastructure layer. So yeah, okay, and very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, good. Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm David Johnson from Object First, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what Object First do and where we've come from and what we've come to address effectively. And it builds upon a lot of what Luca was saying. And we wouldn't, it's very important to note we work exclusively with Veeam, so we are very tied to what they do, and we basically exist to enhance their solution effectively, and also to add to your zero trust principles. So one of the key things for us is the original founders of Veeam, Ratmir and Andre, are the actual founders of Object First as well. So they ran Veeam for many years, and they understand the nature of backup software and the market space and what it does. But the one thing that they wanted to address is a physical appliance, which they never got around to during their time at Veeam. So they created Object First to fit that mold, and we exist purely that their main mission of what they were trying to achieve is to ensure that no business or organization has to pay a ransomware fee ever again. We've been around for about 4 years now in America and all over EMEA, and we've seen adoption of our technology and the solution and what we're trying to address soar in that time. There's a couple of steps that they took to get there. Some of these you guys will be implementing in your organizations today. We just feel that zero trust itself, zero trust data resilience has grown, and the requirements that you need to do to fight against the modern day threat actors just requires an extra couple of steps. They also wanted to ensure that the solution, the storage solution you were using, was easier and simple to use than what had been around prior in the market space. And then also one of the key things is immutability. They wanted to add in immutability from the very, very moment you make your very first backup, and they wanted the time to get to that point of making an immutable backup as fast as possible. If you're looking at us versus other technologies that are on the market, effectively what we have done is we've created a kind of three-pronged approach. So our solution is secure, simple, and powerful. And when we stack ourselves up against the competition, we basically feel that everybody else may do one of these things really, really well. They might even do two of these things really well. But they most have to sacrifice somewhere to, and that is largely because a lot of the competition was created in a different format at different times, been around for a very long time. Some dedupe appliances, that is their primary care. They've been doing that for quite a few years. They've added security measures as time has gone. Your early NASs have gotten more sophisticated as time has gone on, but we're the specific solution created in the last couple of years that was designed to tackle one thing and one thing only, and that is the rise of ransomware attacks. So we have made a product that works seamlessly with Veeam, specifically to target that area, and we have the highest security protocols you can have on a solution. So talking about zero trust principles. So many of you, almost all of you on this call, I'm sure, are adopting some form of version, especially if you're using Veeam or thinking about using Veeam. Veeam have been advocates for zero trust for over 15 years now, going on probably 20. And if you're any kind of well-defined security protocol that you're following in your organization, these steps are pivotal to what you've been doing, and you would have implemented these years ago. Assuming breach, segmenting sections to minimize your attack surfaces. Multi-factor authentication annoys most people in day-to-day life, but it's absolutely mission critical to keeping out bad guys from going into areas they shouldn't, especially if they're in. What you often find is ransomware attackers might break into a particular section and then they just linger before they announce themselves because they're waiting to see how much further they can get, waiting for that time you have to bring something down for an upgrade, where you have to take security protocols away before you modernize, and then they'll move across your business. So, you know, everybody's got multi-factor authentication these days to try and minimize that damage to themselves, and using least privileged access. So, you know, gone are the days where pretty much everybody who works in an IT team has access to absolutely everything, and has the most amount of knowledge of what's going on in their systems. Now it is very much whoever can have the minimal protocols. If only one person needs to have the top credentials, then that is particular. That's probably what a lot of companies have started to do, is basically whittle down who has the privileges to potentially only one or two people with credentials. Now that's the old store. That's the original steps of zero trust principles and how that's come up to a couple of years back. We now see that zero trust principles have to and have been almost forced to adopt a slightly deeper principles and go that one step further. So the zero trust principles have evolved. So they've still got the assuming breach and segment sections, verify, and the use least privileged access. And then if we click one more, we will see the how this has developed to effectively be designed around that backup and recovery piece. So it's not just the segmenting certain sections within your production environment, it's also segmenting your backup software from your backup storage to minimize, again, that attack surface between, you know, if they get into your machine and delete your VBR server, you want your backups to be on a completely different box entirely. Also, everyone's spoken about 321 over the last couple of years, but 321 has now expanded itself to 32110. So that is, you know, we still advocate for cloud, and I know Covenco themselves have the capabilities of hosting data within there. So things like going out from having your first backup go to a solution on premise and then go into cloud, we still advocate for that. That is a critical part to defending yourself against the rise, and also having one of those sections be immutable. Right, so having something that can't be encrypted, can't be deleted, can't be changed is basically critical to your zero trust principles in the modern era. So a lot of questions sometimes regarding where we fit. So obviously, as Veeam have already alluded to of what their capabilities are, many of you might know, but they are obviously the world's leading backup software or backup management platform in the world. And they are critical to us, obviously, as I've mentioned, we only work with them. Where we fit is we would be your primary backup target on premise to make that separation effectively, and you would arrange a backup to our solution. We then advocate for a secondary, so you'd make a second backup job within the Veeam environment to go to either a secondary site where you'd have another Object First appliance, or you could then go out to Covenco's private cloud and have your long-term retention there. So then, you know, in the event of a fire, flood, or any kind of damage, you would be able to recover instantly to that piece. And I think we move on to the next section. I will talk a little bit about the simplicity. So one of the things that is key to what we do is that simplicity. So we've been doing this for a while now, and any feature that we've brought out in the last couple of years has only helped in this area. We don't expect the people using our devices to be experts in any capacity. Right, so we are the definition of that simplicity when it comes to having a backup piece. We understand that the marketplace for the last 20 years, storage, the storage area of it has never been that sexy of an environment. It can get complicated, it can get a bit mundane. The having to update different parts all the time to keep everything secure, different access roles and everything. It can get a bit tedious. One of the key things for ourselves is it is literally, we say that our box can get up and running within 15 minutes, and it can be done following a very, very simple set of protocols. And actually the vast majority of the setup of an Object First appliance is back in the Veeam environment, which you are most likely to be very, very familiar with. So when you configure the UPI, it is a very, very simple process that can take 3 minutes. Then you originate your first backups, you do it in the Veeam console, which you'd be doing, you probably are doing already today. You can mix match UPIs, you can scale as soon as when you first set up an UPI, it goes into a cluster. Any more Object First products that go into that cluster literally already identify with the cluster and scale up automatically. The product itself has automatic updates, so it will download it itself and upload it in 2 minutes, so you don't have to do anything. If you happen to have it not connected to the internet, you can download a copy and manually upload it if that's what you want, if you wanted to put it in a dark site or anything like that. So from a recovery point of view, one of the key things for ourselves is that we leverage the SOS API that Veeam have, and we don't just use the ability on the SOS API to see what's happening on the box or on the disks themselves and see space. We actually use the speed enhancing features such as load balancing and caching to be able to speed the recovery speed back when you're trying to rehydrate your data and to write to the box itself from the very get-go. We have incredibly fast speeds on the boxes themselves, so 1 gig on our smaller appliances, 2 gig on our biggest appliance, and as you stack those up the cluster, the speeds start to double with every single node that goes in to, again, increase that performance. So you end up with an incredibly fast solution that you can recover from instantaneously. It's on-premise, and you know it's encrypted and safe from the very get-go, so that your data, whilst it's in an immutable window, cannot be touched. So it gives you that peace of mind immediately, and there's no expertise required to get it to that level. So some of the flavors of our sizes that we've got out there. So we have dedicated, so this is a dedicated appliance, and we have 3 desktop versions. So we have an 8 terabyte, a 16 terabyte, and a 24 terabyte. And then we have rack mount versions, which are 20, 40, 72, 128, 216, and 432. Again, those can go in clusters of 4, and you can then do a scale out backup repository of those and get up to 16 nodes if you wanted to, getting up to 7 petabytes if that is the size of your data. But we do start as small as 8 terabytes. We also have a consumption model that starts as small as 10 terabytes at its lowest commit level, and again, that's on that recurring revenue cycle if that's your preferred buying method. So just touched upon it. One of the things that you get when you buy one of our solutions, if you buy it on a capex purchase from Covenco, you effectively will be buying it on either a 3-year cycle or a 5-year cycle. And what you get included is software updates included that happens automatically. Technical support if anything happens with a disk or a drive or the CPU or the power supply. There's a spare of all of them, but if something happens, you've raised a ticket and the supplier will come out and swap those faulty products out for new ones, so you don't have to do anything about it. And yeah, as I mentioned, 3 or 5 years is the standard. If your consumption, it's 1-year contracts or multi-year contracts directly with Covenco, and then you're just paying for what you need, and you pay as you grow. So as you start to grow, you might go up the tiers, but fundamentally it might give you a lower barrier entry, especially if you don't have the capital straight away to go on a capex. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we got our second poll. How often does your organization conduct a full end-to-end recovery test of your critical systems from backup? Okay, so 55%-ish of customers on the call will recover at least once a year, 7% quarterly, 13% monthly or more, which is pretty impressive. And actually, yeah, a fifth that do it less than a year or never, which isn't ideal. So maybe we can help there. Excellent, thank you. All right, moving on. Okay, so in this next section, Ben and I will be sort of talking about the considerations for creating a robust backup and recovery plan. And I think to start that off, we're going to move to Ben.
So yeah, obviously the guys that have just talked before us, we've gone through quite a lot. I suppose we've talked about servers, we've talked about storage, networks, a lot of technical bits. So some key components we've got here of a modern DR plan. We're just going to talk about RTO and RPO. I know we talk about RTO and RPO all the time. They're key buzzwords that we use, again, similar like we talk about 32110, etc. But it's actually quite interesting how there's, we talk to a lot of customers, a lot of businesses who don't understand the RTO or RPO, or understand how to really hit the nail on the head of how that translates to their business when it comes to what we need to do to look at in a backup and recovery plan. So yeah, we'll keep it simple. Recovery time objective is going to be how quickly most of your systems must be restored, to avoid any sort of major business impact. RTO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective is going to be how much data loss is acceptable to your business. And yeah, like we say, business translation. So how does this translate to your business in your sort of tier 1 and tier 0 applications, and how does it build into what we call really an application resiliency matrix or an application dependency matrix of which of those tier 0 and tier 1 applications rely on each other. And yeah, really how that builds into the plan. Establishing a clear chain of command and communication. Sorry, losing my voice today. Assigning roles, we need to make sure we've got some key decision makers, technical leads, communication officers. We see it quite a lot of the time. Obviously, Gerdit mentioned it earlier. The managed services team within Covenco, you know, we live and breathe this day in, day out. We see a lot of this. David mentioned it as well earlier. You know, the restrictions that technical teams have within certain businesses and things. So, you know, creating these sort of escalation paths and kind of pre-approved templates and messages, you know, for the internal stakeholders and external stakeholders is really key, and it really does matter. Security messages and integrating things better more into recovery. We're actually going to talk about that in a bit of a later slide. I'm a little bit wary on the time, we're a bit tight, but we will talk about how the Covenco cloud platforms and Covenco solutions and services, can help and assist here, and obviously work with the Object First solution. But yeah, beyond technology, so we need to think, you know, why this matters to your business. Ultimately, you know, we talked about these things earlier: customer confidence, regulatory compliance, financial impact. For example, you know, every hour of downtime can cost thousands or millions. Again, we talked on it earlier. So we will talk about the, you know, the criticality of testing.
I'd just like to add that when we're having these discussions with customers, it's never a given that these things are known, you know, or they're defined. And often it's an IT department that defines a recovery time, recovery point objective, as opposed to the business telling the IT department what they actually want and require. So there is sort of this sort of upward dialogue with the business, and these should be agreed and defined by the business and then implemented by the IT department. And we can help with all of that process as well. And we can help by assisting with you know, the chain of command and the communication planning. And on the security integration, we've often found that IT security teams and the infrastructure teams kind of do their own thing and maybe don't work as closely together. And I think we're seeing more of that communication developing now. So these are real critical parts of having a successful backup recovery plan.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, this kind of brings us on to our next slide of, I suppose, the you know, the critical importance of testing. And I suppose you know, it is what it is in the paperwork. You know, with, you know, when we are testing, we are relying on assumptions, you know, and assumptions do fail under pressure. So yeah, no, we're going to look here at some sort of methods of testing, and you know, Gerdit kind of hit the nail on the head there, really, that when we look at this application resiliency matrix and how that translates into the business, there can kind of be a disconnect between, you know, IT infrastructure, applications, and, you know, higher up the chain, you know, senior management team example. So when it comes to method of testing, you know, it does need to be a really wide scope. You know, we need to look at tabletop exercises, which, you know, those sort of audiences are, you know, management and stakeholders, partial failover tests as well, and things like that. You know, the audience is sort of the IT teams. Full failover tests, again, we'll talk into where Covenco can come into that, where you can do what we class as, you know, next gen DR testing, taking that DR testing to the next generation of, you know, taking all your edges and doing those sort of DR testing. So, you know, we're not just talking about cores and headquarters. We're, you know, taking the edge sites that our customers have and edge data centers and factoring those into failover simulations and things. So, you know, it is literally taking it from theory to practice. And again, in a couple of slides, we'll talk about how Covenco can help with that. So which statement best describes your team's knowledge of and access to your ransomware recovery runbook?
The statistics on the screen that I'm seeing here: high readiness 8%, digital access only 15%, limited knowledge 46%, and about 21% for plan not formalized or updated. Yeah, this is what we would expect in a mid-market sort of environment. And like Ben talked about the maturity assessments and models, you know, we can help to take you up that scale and understand how you can mature as a business in terms of data protection holistically. But yeah, very representative of what we would generally expect in this sector. Okay, so moving on. Right, so what can we do to protect our businesses together? Well, we talked about, you know, regular software updates and patching, because, you know, the biggest exploit still out there is software vulnerabilities. robust endpoint protection. An EDR, extended detection and response, is almost a given now. If you're not at that level, please do get up to that level, because they have the intelligence of AI to go out and root for more sophisticated malware. Multi-factor authentication, I'm pretty certain, is adopted by most now, but if it's not, again, it's essential to protect remote access and stop these bad actors, or make it that much more difficult for them to get into your environments. Enhanced network security, I mean, this is a big subject, and can go very, very deep, right? So, VLANing, segregation, firewall upon firewall. I've been doing a lot of work with a very large customer of mine about really locking down what comes in and out of a firewall, who can have access, who can't have access. So all of this goes into that sort of enhanced network security area. Email security, there's various flavors of it at gateway level, at client level, but it's important because still one of the biggest breaches is the socially engineered attacks that compromise credentials, and then those are used to break into an organization. Adopting least privileged, that was talked about earlier by both David and Luca. Again, if you can reduce that scope, then the better place that you're in. Application allow listing, Ben, maybe elaborate on that one.
Yeah, definitely. So again, application allow listing and whitelisting and blacklisting. We've mentioned zero trust probably five or six times, I think, on the webinar already. Again, big buzzwords that are out there. There are many solutions out there that can help with just locking those sort of things down. We've got conditional access and things like that in Entra ID and Azure and Intune. Again, they can all tie into the sort of single sign-on and things like that. So again, restricting things down to that rule of least privilege on application level.
Excellent. So employee training and awareness, again, it's the employees that are being targeted. They're seen as that weak link. So, I'm sure you've all got some kind of awareness training application in place, but sometimes those applications aren't enough. If we can educate our users of what's trending, what these threats are, maybe it's a company-wide presentation. I have to do one every 6 months as part of our ISO 27001 process internally at Covenco, for example. But the more knowledgeable they are about the current threats and maybe what's coming, the better it is, because that's what builds the education, that's what builds the promotion of a security culture. So from a backup and recovery planning point of view, regular backups, absolutely. The 3211-0 principle spoken about by David, and also Veeam and the ability it gives you to have a local immutable backup, an off-site online backup, a offline backup that could be to tape, it could be to an object storage platform with immutability off-site. But these are essential, or an essential framework to follow to building out a successful backup strategy. And once you've done those backups, you have to test them, and Veeam again has the tool sets to automatically test these on a regular basis with sure recovery processes. Disaster recovery planning, again, if you think that DR is all about just protecting your data, it's not. It's about being able to recover that data and recover it effectively and efficiently in a clean fashion, and then make it available to your users. It goes that whole sort of circle. It's not just about recovering a VM. It's about providing the access of that VM to a user, which involves other things like communications and networking, and firewalls, and all. It's a much broader area, and we have the expertise to help our customers with all of that. We conduct regular recovery testing, and we advocate that our customers do that as part of a successful plan. And then the development of an instant response plan. I don't know how many people will have an instant response plan on this call, but if you don't, then please develop one. And it's about taking the time to think about, well, if I was to be hit by an incident tomorrow, how would I react to that? And maybe start jotting those things down and thinking about what's important, thinking about who in the business would need to be involved in that process, in that plan, in that recovery process. And again, if you need some assistance with that, we can help with instant response planning, we can put in place retainers, we can do tabletop exercises, which are extremely valuable, because just like a DR recovery plan for IT, we can also provide you with an exercisable template and plan for an instant response tabletop exercise. So key takeaways: the threat's real, so it's not just about prevention of, it's about cyber resilience holistically now. Immutability on-premise is becoming more and more popular. In my opinion, it's no longer optional. It should be something that you plan for in your budgeting for improving your existing backup solutions. Veeam 13 is exciting. We'll be having a lot more information sent to our customers on that, but the VSA, Veeam Software Appliance, really locking down, honing in on security. That's really what we want our customers to adopt as part and parcel of a successful plan and strategy going forward into next year. And then not only the backup side, but the recovery testing. If you've got internal recovery plans where you've got split data centers, we can help with that. If you don't have a facility like that, we can offer you a facility like that. So we'd be delighted to talk to you about how we can improve your existing DR recovery plans. And if you are interested in that, then please reach out, and we will certainly reach out to book a complimentary strategy session. To wrap up, we've got a few offers here, if you want to call it that. If you want a backup recovery review session, then we're more than happy to schedule that. We can follow the matrix that we have that we use with various customers. Very, very successful in generating a plan. If you are thinking about investing in something like Object First, there's an offer at the moment that if you order something before the end of January, there'll be a 10% discount. And again, if you are interested in migrating to Veeam version 13 from your current version, then again, we are there to support you in that process, and we'd be delighted to contact you and go through some of that process with you. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hosting you again in the future.